perhaps the last um, couple of points. One is Karl Popper. This is what Popper's work is all about, and Ernest was influenced by it, and why I found it very exciting and interesting, the idea of aiming for openness and not allowing any part. And it's the theoretical side of modernity, that you live in an open society where religion or politics or other things don't dominate. And Popper's plea was to try and keep this. And in a way, he was part of a general movement. People like Isaiah Berlin and so on, were others, liberals of that period, looked across the sea to Germany and saw what happens if you close down systems. And that's why Popper, for example, hated Marx and hated all fascist systems and closed systems. And that's where Ernest obviously appreciated his work. And it came into anthropology with Robin Horton's idea of the open predicament and so on and so on.
And that's actually where a lot of the tension about modern China is, isn't it?
Yeah.
How open can it be? And if it's not open enough, then it's going to be, there is going to be a kind of big clash there.
Well, this absolutely, and we can talk about that further, because there is again a sort of paradox. I mean, a very simple paradox to point out, that it's both closed in that there are lots of things you can and can't say, more than, or in areas which we don't think are suitable. And we have grown used to a sort of freedom of thinking. But when you look at, say, missionary accounts of 19th century China, or what strikes them is the huge tolerance of alternative ideologies within China. You can think what you like, you can say what you like, no one cares. The only thing they do care about is if you start attacking the emperor. You try and change the political system, then you're in deep trouble. But they are, because they don't have a monotheistic religion, and because Chinese simultaneously believe in a whole set of parallel truths in Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and ancestor worship, and so on and so on, there is no idea of heresy. So you can't stamp down, you don't have heresy trials in China. The trials you do have, Bo Xilai and others, are political trials. So basically, it's a world where one thing, they believe that, as Ernest would, you need order. If you don't have order, particularly in a big place like that, with its multifarious systems and ancient, if you lose, I mean, Shakespeare has that famous saying, of chaos will emerge if you unthread that. It's the fear that is expressed in the book written at the end of the English Civil War by Hobbes, the Leviathan. You need the Leviathan, you need centralized political system. Now, the West says, oh, no, you don't need that. There's a better way of doing it through democracy and civil society and so on and so on. One of the interesting things we've discussed, and we'll discuss again, no doubt, is that all seemed good enough, and we could go around criticizing and saying, why can't China be like us and have an open society and so on. But as we look at the chaos that is developing in America, with one person standing between, every day new revelation, one person standing between the end of American democracy as we knew it and an authoritarian system being created, we begin to wonder whether democracy is a great guarantee. And if we start looking at the other thing, which is what we are allowed to talk about and not talk about, we suddenly realize that in China, if you criticize Xi Jinping and the party too openly, then you're in trouble. In France, if you criticize Jews too critically, you're in deep trouble. You can criticize Muslims, you can put up your cartoons and so on and so on. But if you criticize Jews, or in this country, you can criticize Muslims, perhaps again, are okay. If you start being supportive of pedophiles or condemning homosexuality or using the N word or saying women are inferior, you're in deep trouble. So we just, rather like Latour's idea of hybrids, we've shifted the areas where you can be critical to other areas. And whereas deeply offended by overstepping the new categories where we can't talk about things and we can't act. So if you could, and this would be my last thought, if you and I could devise a kind of measure that you could apply to societies which showed the amount of their speech and thought which was unfree. In other words, they couldn't talk about these things or write about these things. And you took it from society to society. My guess is that if you took it to China, there would be this sort of red area at the top which said no criticism of the party, shall we say. The rest of it, it's up to you. You can do what you like. And it's, 80, 90%, because most people aren't interested in going around criticizing the party. As long as the party is doing things reasonably, why should they bother? Then you take it to other societies. You take it to Islamic societies in the Middle East, you take it to America, you take it to France, you will find lots of things up there. And it gets down to possibly more of your total intellectual life is subject to controls. Now, I sort of came across this when I thought about my lecturing career in Cambridge, because for 40 years I lectured to students. And if a student had come up and said, Alan, can you lecture about what you like? I'd have said, of course, this is a free university in a free country. But I knew every moment that I was censoring, that there were many things I couldn't. And occasionally when I overstepped that, which wasn't very often, for example, during the Iraq War, I felt so strongly about the wrongness of Blair and that I couldn't keep it out of my lectures. And so I would be talking about Montesquieu or something, and suddenly I'd say, this kind of activity that we're doing is just like what Montesquieu was describing for Louis XIV or something. And occasionally students would come up afterwards who were members of farish right groups in the university and say, Alan, you're getting a bit near the edge. You're bringing politics into your lectures. You're not being dispassionate. Now, this is something that, another test of this would be to look at the BBC. Talk about politically correct. And with the BBC, and this must be my last point, it's taken to the extreme that there are many things which are true, which they cannot say are true. For example, whenever the BBC get onto China, they say, oh, ghastly China, Uyghurs, Huawei, Tibet, Hong Kong, Taiwan. It just, you just press a button and that lot comes out. And the independent newspaper, which I've got, is the same. You can't write about China honestly. You can't speak about it in our media honestly because it is taboo. You start speaking about it honestly as in the Independent or the BBC, and someone, Duncan Smith, rings up the BBC and says, I see the BBC is getting very biased towards China. When the WHO reported that there was no evidence that the Wuhan lab had leaked, America and Trump said, oh, the WHO has been paid off by China. We're not going to give you any funding because you're just a lackey of China. You have to watch
Mm.